Yeah. This ain't no Meltzer recap. This that boots hit the mat, mic drop, headlock, slap type shit. Fuck the IWC. Fuck the IWC. Fuck the IWC. This is CWC. Yo, Notorious D, I ain't here to debate y'all body slam takes. Then I mock the creators, your fave podcast sound like they scared of a promo. I talk facts in your face like a stiff-ass cholo. No respect for the dogs who hide behind melts. They sucking stars off like it boosts they belts. While I'm cooking these takes with a mic and a match. Got the casual fam saying, talk that trash. I don't do fantasy cards or Reddit wars. I spit pipe bombs like I kicked in the doors. Y'all cuddling AEW, begging for hugs. I'm calling out marks like I'm seen on Thug. We the reason that the crowd stay lit while they beg for a work rate. We strive for the shit. Fuck the IWC. Fuck the IWC. Fuck the IWC. This is CW.
What is up, CWC? We are in here tonight. It is Talkback Tuesday, May the 13th, 2025. This is the CWC Podcast. I am the voice of the casual wrestling community, Notorious Dirty D, and tonight we have a hell of a show lined up for you guys. If you're new here, welcome to the program. If you're looking for some new wrestling friends, and you feel like the internet is full of a bunch of pretentious pricks, this is your new home. You are part of the CWC, where the motto is simple: fuck the IWC. It is Talkback Tuesday, where I answer the Discord and YouTube discussions that have happened over the past week. Plus, I touch on any new news that has popped up. This episode of the CWC Podcast is brought to you by the Casual Wrestling Merch Store. Get your very own Fuck the IWC hoodie or t-shirt right now. Let's jump into it, starting with WWE has announced that they are cutting down on the length of premium live events in favor of more exciting, tight-paced events. As a casual wrestling fan, this is music to my ears. Sometimes I swear that WWE is listening to me when I speak. On yesterday's episode, I spoke about being a 2-hour wrestling guy. I can manage wrestling for about 2 to 2.5 hours before my brain starts to check out and real life starts to set back in and take over, and I can't just give my entire focus to what's on TV. So gone are the days of the 3 to 4 hour premium live event that is just filled with shit we absolutely don't need to be watching. And now, if we could just do this to Friday Night SmackDown, my wrestling watching experience would be practically flawless at this point. I think I could almost say that it would be a renaissance of my professional wrestling watching life if we could tighten this all up and get this into a tight, if premium live events, 2.5 hours feels like the sweet spot. For weekly wrestling television, I like 2 hours. If we could tighten up to that format, I don't know that Monday Night Raw is ever going to get there. I think 2.5 seems to be where they're comfortable, and I can live with that, especially when I can skip commercials. I can live with that format. If I can get Friday Night SmackDown down to that 2 hours, and then you give me a tight 2.5 hour premium live event that is just jam-packed full of action and everything that I need to see, shout out to you, WWE, for kind of bucking the trend. AEW has kind of tried to bring us into this era of these 4 and 5 hour, pay-per-views that are just absolutely insane. You have to be a sicko to sit down and watch 5 hours of professional wrestling. I still believe WrestleMania is far too long. WrestleMania should be 1 3.5 hour premium live event, and that's it. You can have something else on Saturday that you call a different name, but the actual card of WrestleMania should be one night. Now, I don't know how this works when we go to these 2-day events, these 2-day SummerSlams, these 2-day Royal Rumbles. Maybe the idea behind that is that if you have 2.5 hour shows, it's more manageable than trying to put together a SummerSlam that's like 3.5, 3 hour and 15-minute shows. I guess maybe that makes more sense, but it'll be interesting to see going forward if they actually stick to this or if this is just one of those talking points. I love it though. I absolutely love it. I thought Backlash felt tight. I thought Backlash felt very put together. There was a point in time when we were watching Backlash and we didn't know that Cena and Orton could go 45 to an hour. There was a time a lot of us thought this thing's going to end 30 minutes early. This thing's going to make a lot of headroom for the UFC event. It ended up going a little longer than we thought, but I think we all were excited that the event felt tight, that the pacing felt right. When WWE hits that correct pacing, man, there's nothing better to watch than that. Second story here, just quickly touch on the rumors are starting to float around about a WWE draft in the very near future. I'm not going to go real deep into this because this is all speculation, but I think it's time. I think there's definitely an imbalance of the rosters right now. Maybe it's an imbalance of writing. I don't know what it is, but SmackDown is definitely the tougher of the two shows to watch. And so how you figure out how to balance that out will be interesting. I do think that if the draft is floating around, this presents the opportunity for CM Punk to get onto the same show as John Cena, and we could get to that Money in the Bank match we were talking about yesterday. Because I still think after I was told that was a possibility, it had never crossed my mind. I still think that's what I want. Now, I've seen CM Punk's name thrown around for a Money in the Bank ladder match. Let's not put old man in that. Let's not make CM Punk put his body through a ladder match. He's deserved or he's earned the right to not have to do that and put his body on the line. Let's put CM Punk in the main event against John Cena. Let's let them run it back one more time, and let's let a little nostalgia kick in, and let's do that. Don't stop making these posters, guys. Stop putting these ideas in Triple H's head that we need CM Punk in a Money in the Bank match. We don't need CM Punk to win Money in the Bank. And we don't need CM Punk in a ladder match. CM Punk is good in the stories that he's in right now, and I will be perfectly happy that come Money in the Bank, we get CM Punk versus John Cena. Now, I've seen a couple people throw names out for Money in the Bank, and I think this is getting interesting. I think you're starting to see a little bit of the inner WWE tribalism between fans, tribalism is a good thing. I think it's good to align with certain people. I'm starting to see kind of two camps arise when it comes to the Money in the Bank situation. I'm seeing one camp that's starting to form around Braun Breaker and believe that Braun is the guy that should win Money in the Bank. But I'm starting to see the groundswell for a second camp that believes Karrion Kross is the guy to win Money in the Bank. And I've got to say, I'm not mad. I'm not mad at either choice, but if I have to throw my name into a bucket right now, give me Karrion Kross. I like what he could do with the Money in the Bank briefcase. I think he could build himself. I think he could establish himself. And then I think when he finally cashes in, you're going to get that big kind of groundswell moment where the fans kind of feel like they were behind it before WWE, and it'll be a very feel-good moment. So, interesting enough, draft possibilities coming up. I think it's time. Let's not do another one of these weird free agency things. Let's have a draft. I still say what we should do is just dedicate one Friday night SmackDown to the draft. Not even with wrestling. Take the wrestling out of it. Take the matches out of it in between. And let's just have a proper draft like the NBA does, like the NFL does. Let's build an event and a day around the draft. And let's actually have them draft two separate rosters every year. And let's not do the thing where we're just picking one or two different people. Let's really shake this thing up and let's distribute these names in a certain way. Or you could keep the rosters the way they are. Make a certain number of people that are protected within that roster, and then the bottom half of the roster in NXT become eligible for a draft. Let's make it happen. Let's create some fanfare around a draft. Okay, so let's get into some of the Discord discussion here. This first discussion that I want to dive deeper into comes in regards to this idea. It kind of got thrown around, this idea that if you're a fan of only WWE, then you're not a professional wrestling fan. And so I've seen this has caused a polarizing kind of feel throughout the entire internet. It's kind of inside of our Discord. There's various different takes, and I don't want to shit on anybody's opinion because anybody's opinion is their opinion, but I'm going to clear up why I believe and why I stay steadfast in my belief that this is a bad faith argument. When you make this argument that if you're only a fan of WWE, then you're not a fan of professional wrestling. To me, this comes off as major gatekeeping vibes because I hate conversations and I hate when people take a stance where the counterpoint is not a two-way street. So what you're saying is, if I'm not a fan of all wrestling, I don't get to be a wrestling fan. And what I'm saying is, if you're a fan of just AEW, you're still a wrestling fan. If you're still a fan of New Japan, if you're just a fan of New Japan Pro Wrestling, you're still a pro wrestling fan. I'm making the argument that there is a large group of people who only want to watch the curated best of what there is, and that they can measure the best as the most money, like the company that makes the most money, the company that has the biggest TV deals, whatever that metric is. But we can't get into these arguments of semantics. WWE is the top of the mountain. Like, this is not in contingency. This is not in question. WWE is the top of the mountain. How you want to disperse everything else after WWE is fine, but WWE is, if we're going across the major sports, nobody disagrees NBA is the top. Nobody disagrees that NFL is the top. Nobody disagrees that NHL is the top. So nobody should disagree that WWE is the top. And then you get into this argument of, like, if you don't watch the subgenres of each of these sports, then you're not a real fan. That, I don't like that, or I think that's a bad faith argument. You can watch, and if you have the amount of time to dedicate to watch NXT and AEW and New Japan Pro Wrestling and TNA Wrestling, more power to you. But you don't get to tell me I'm not a wrestling fan because I only dedicate a set number of hours to watching wrestling, right? I'll give you 2.5 on Monday. You're lucky if you get me for 3 on Friday. And that's all I've got. I don't have more time to give. I'm at swim practice Monday through Thursday for one daughter. I'm at cheerleading practice. I'm at soccer practice. I think where the disconnect comes between the people who want to make this argument is they just might not understand what some people's life consists of when they say they're busy, right? I own 3 businesses. So I have to wake up, I assess all of those problems, I work that. I run a content creation company. I have to assess those problems and handle those problems. When 5 o'clock comes, I become the ultimate dad, and I'm at swimming practice, I'm at gymnastics practice, I'm at cheerleading, I'm at soccer. So I have a very limited time to sit down and watch something. And so for me to just watch WWE and for me not to dedicate the time to Google who Hangman Adam Page is or why the Young Bucks are important or TNA Wrestling, I'm not discounting who those people are, but I'm telling you, if they're not in the curated world of WWE, and that is what I expect to be the best version of professional wrestling that I love, then they don't matter to me. And so I don't think it's unfair to say that if you just watch WWE, you're a professional wrestling fan. I don't watch college football. I'm a NFL fan. I don't watch the NBA G League. I'm an NBA and basketball fan. You don't have to watch. If you have the time and you really love something, sure, you can dig into deeper layers. It's the same argument with video games, right? If you only play Madden, if you only play Call of Duty, that you're not a video gamer. No, you are. You're just scratching the surface of what that box does. Some people get in there and they play JRPGs and they get real deep. But that doesn't make you it makes you a hardcore gamer, but it doesn't make you more of a gamer than anybody else. Just like watching NXT, watching AEW doesn't make you more of a professional wrestling fan. It just means you're looking for a deeper experience. It's the same argument I make when we talk about like WWE is the Coca-Cola of professional wrestling. There are lots of people who will order a soda and they will say, I'll have a Coke. And that's because it is the recognizable brand. It is, and if you only drink Coke, you still drink soda. You're still a fan of soda. You're not just a Coca-Cola person. If you drink Coke Zero, you're still a soda person. This argument that you have to be nuanced and believe that other things exist, that's where it gets messy to me. NXT, to me, if I'm breaking this down, NXT is what I would equate to being the college football to the WWE being the NFL, okay? So, if I only watch the NFL, I'm still a football fan. But the next thing most people would watch would be the developmental league, college football, that feeds into what they're going to watch later on. I promise you, there's not very many people watching Canadian football. There's not a lot of people watching the AFL. And if you start to limit who can be a football fan based on the people who watch the AFL, you're now talking about a very small niche group of people. No different than if you're talking about, professional wrestling fans as only people who watch more than just WWE. You're now starting to narrow down and gatekeep a very small group of people who are allowed to call themselves professional wrestling fans. And I don't understand what it matters to people who gets into the club of being a professional wrestling fan. If you start to make the argument that you have to watch more than WWE, I think you immediately cut out 75% of the people who just say they like pro wrestling when they're talking about they like WWE. Like I said, I think this is an argument of free time. I think when you have the ability to watch AEW and you have the ability to watch NXT and you are home every night and it's appointment television and you can watch it, I think your opinion would differ. If they only gave you 2 hours to watch wrestling, your opinion would differ. It's just that you're afforded the luxury of being able to watch all of these things. And so then you start to view it through rose-colored glasses. The argument that it's narrow-minded, you don't acknowledge other wrestlers exist. That's kind of the argument I get seen thrown around. But I like to use the kind of comparison of UFC when this gets thrown out, and that is the Michael Chandler situation, right? For a long time, when Michael Chandler was not in the UFC, there were a lot of people who argued this dude's the best light heavyweight in the business, that you can be the best and be in a different company. That's how it works. And all of a sudden, Michael Chandler comes over to UFC and he gets a wake-up call. He fit right in, but he got his ass whooped by a couple of guys. And the reality is that maybe just the UFC talent pool is just overall better. And so when I'm watching WWE, that's kind of my thought process, is maybe not every person in WWE is the best, but overall, the curation of those guys, there's a reason they exist in WWE, in that universe, and I expect that Triple H curates wrestling for me so that I can expect to see what I enjoy. I don't enjoy the AEW product. I don't enjoy Will Osprey. I don't enjoy the Young Bucks. I haven't really loved Kenny Omega from what I've seen. And so it's not me saying that these people don't exist and maybe they're not good at their job, but if they're not doing it in WWE, to me, you're not doing it at the top level. If I took any NFL quarterback and inserted them into the CFL, right? Or the AFL, and they're going to be talented, based on skill. There's going to be a lot less pressure. So maybe a guy who has all the intangibles but can't handle the pressure, maybe that's a better situation. But the reality is, if you win a CFL Super Bowl, whatever that is, an AFL Super Bowl, whatever that is, I'm never going to respect that on the same level as winning the NFL Super Bowl, no matter who you are, no matter how good your stats were. To me, WWE is the top of the pyramid. And so it's hard for me to listen to the other side. I try to be open-minded, but when I start to hear this, like, well, you're not a pro wrestling fan. Well, to me, that's gatekeeping. You're gatekeeping the ability to be a pro wrestling fan because I only want to watch, and I know this pisses some sports fans off as well, but I'm telling you, this is the reality of the situation is there are people who are I'm only going to watch the NBA. I don't watch college basketball. I'm only going to watch the NFL. I don't watch college football. I'm only going to watch, Major League Baseball when that is even something I watch, but I'm damn sure not going to watch college baseball. It is because of my limited amount of time, I only want to watch the best of the best do what they do. And when someone like Will Osprey openly says, I don't want to go to WWE, that's fine, bro. Do you? But then you have to live with my criticism of saying you don't want to be on the top. Your mountaintop stops at about 4,000 feet. The WWE mountaintop's at 10,000 feet. So even if Will Osprey reaches the top of AEW, 4,000 feet is as high as he could get. That's the argument that I'm making. I'm making the argument that if you watch any form, you watch micro wrestling, you're a fan of pro wrestling. I'm not trying to gatekeep. You play Nintendo Switch, you're a video game person, right? If you only watch the special teams in NFL, you're still a football fan. That's the argument I'm making is we got to quit gatekeeping this individual right to what makes you a fan and what qualifies you. I can't stand this idea of like what qualifies you to speak on professional wrestling. I get the argument all the time in the comment section, and it goes one of two ways, right? It goes one, they go, if you're talking about wrestling, you're not a casual wrestling fan. If you don't think I'm a casual wrestling fan, then why are you gatekeeping me from being a pro wrestling fan, right? And if you do think, the other argument is, well, if you're a casual wrestling fan, you shouldn't be talking about wrestling. Why can't I talk about wrestling from the casual wrestling perspective? That doesn't make sense to me, that we have to gatekeep and we have to have a certain level of knowledge, and that's just so dangerous that you believe every person that talks about something needs to talk about it from the exact same point of view and the exact same amount of knowledge. Like, I'm speaking about wrestling as a casual wrestling watcher. I make that clear in everything I say. When I talk about, I've laid out, like, maybe I need to create a term sheet with definitions for what I speak about, right? Because here's what a casual wrestling fan is. A casual wrestling fan is somebody with limited time to watch wrestling who is not so heavily invested that it affects the rest of their day. When I turn off wrestling, I don't think about it again until I get on a microphone to talk about it. It's not affecting me when I leave the house. I don't sit and read the news all day. Like, I just talk and document my wrestling watching experience. When I talk about an IWC member, I'm not talking about somebody who's on the internet. I know that's what the literal definition of the word IWC is, but we've reclaimed that word to mean more of the toxic wrestling community. It's just not as fun to say, and it doesn't trigger as many people, but the toxic wrestling community is that group of people who live and die, who can't understand the business side of wrestling, who think wrestling only exists with what happens inside the four corners of the ring. We got to start, when I talk about a successful pro wrestler, the definition I'm talking about is every aspect of the business I treat equally. I don't place more weight on the flips you can do. In fact, I probably place the least amount of respect on the Circus Soleil shit. I think it's more intriguing that you can tell a story, that you can cut a promo. I've said it over and over again. Give me a guy who can cut a promo and wrestle at 50% of everybody else, and he can still be a star. But a guy who can wrestle at 100% and only cut a promo at 50%, he's never going to get over, because the bulk of wrestling fans, I will repeat this over and over again, that 80%, the casual fan base, the grandmas, the little kids, the businessmen, the lawyers who just buy tickets to show up and watch wrestling, they give a fuck about the theatrics, the story, the over the top, the pyro, the lights. They don't give a shit. They don't even really know. A lot of people are too drunk to know what's going on in the ring, but they can understand the visual cues. They can understand the talking and the talking shit. And they can understand when the bad guy talks shit about their city, and that gives them a visceral reaction. That's what I'm talking about when I talk about a pro wrestler. So when I say something like, the latest thing I did that pissed people off was, I said Dominic Mysterio is a better pro wrestler than Will Osprey. And people lost their fucking mind because they're so narrow-minded in this idea that they have to hear it the way they want to hear it. And that is that I'm saying Dominic Mysterio is better in the ring when it comes to X's and O's than Will Osprey. It's not what I'm saying. I'm saying Dominic has the whole thing figured out. And in the long run, having that whole thing figured out is going to be far more beneficial to Dominic Mysterio than Will Ospreay's ability to do the same Circus Soleil shit week after week after week. Dominic Mysterio is constantly evolving. He's constantly getting better. Somebody who I was extremely critical on very early is now become, I don't have a problem eating my words and saying I was so wrong on Dominic Mysterio. Because to see the level of intelligence that this dude has, Dominic Mysterio's not thinking in the same fucking atmosphere as a Will Ospreay. And now, let's be fair. Dominic Mysterio's dad is one of the greatest of all time. So all this says is that Dominic Mysterio is not a Nepo baby. He actually put the fucking hard work in, and he listened and paid attention when all these other people were talking. He absorbed that knowledge. But the reality is, it seems to me, as a casual wrestling fan from the outside, that CM Punk tried to instill some of this knowledge on the AEW wrestlers, and they told him to fuck off and leave. And so it seems to me, a Dominic Mysterio is absorbing all of this information, and that's the difference. And that's why, to me, Dominic Mysterio is a better all-around professional wrestler than Will Ospreay. So the second thing I want to circle back and have a conversation about, and I've had this conversation on numerous occasions, but I understand new people come to the show from time to time to watch the show, and I think that it gets lost where I stand on the size argument. There is a size argument, and at one point I had a fun conversation with Sledge, who was a professional wrestler, about the size argument, and he really confirmed a lot of what I believed, and that was, he gave me the term that I'd never heard, the airport test, right? When you see somebody, you see a star, Sledge looks like a wrestler, right? Everything I see about Sledge screams professional wrestler. And so the point I made the other day was that Rhea Ripley is the alpha female. She's still the biggest, she's still the strongest, she's still the most athletic, and that when you look in that ring, for the average person who turns on the TV, they do not believe that Io Sky, that Roxanne Perez, or that Julia can beat up Rhea Ripley in a fight. And I was given, this is an argument that comes up from time to time, and I've addressed it before, but I'm going to take the time to address it again right now. There's one of two names that always come up when I make the size argument. And the first one is always Rey Mysterio, right? So every time I say that these guys or these girls are too small, and that's just too small to be believable against Rhea Ripley, not too small to be wrestlers, because I believe that Roxanne and Julia, they're the future of the business, and I could be wrong about the way the business is trending, but as long as alphas like Bianca and Rhea exist, it's going to be tough for them to overtake the top spot. But anyway, Rey Mysterio is the first name that comes up, right? Everybody goes, Rey Mysterio did it. Don't give me a one-off example of Rey Mysterio, because Rey Mysterio was larger than life. Rey Mysterio was in great stories that told the David versus Goliath. Rey Mysterio had a mask. Rey Mysterio was built and booked so correctly to be the little guy who could beat up the big guy that it was a one-off thing. That can one-off situations are great. That's what makes it fun. But it's not going to happen for Julia, Io Sky, Roxanne Perez. Maybe one of the three will get that storyline to be the giant killer, but that's not a regular occurring situation. The problem is most normal people, casual wrestling fans, do not believe that somebody who is 140 pounds like Darby Allin can beat up Brock Lesnar. It's just never, you're not going to sell me on that. So the second name that gets thrown around a lot, and this is, I don't mean to, this isn't an attack on who said this. This is just me explaining why I believe that I don't agree with this argument. The second one is when they throw around a name like Royce Gracie, right? They'll go, Royce Gracie used to beat up heavyweights, so you have to believe that these smaller people can beat up the larger people. Number one, Royce Gracie, very, very, very special case, very, very fringe example, right? Very, very on the out. That's not the normal. There's one Royce Gracie. There's not 100 Royce Gracies. And the reality is, this is where people tend to not like the argument I make, but Royce Gracie could not beat up a heavyweight today. I understand that in the early days of UFC and mixed martial arts, Royce Gracie was fighting a lot of guys who were extremely into specialties. They only wrestled. They only did, kickboxing or striking. And so he was able to manipulate. If you put Royce Gracie in the ring right now with a Brock Lesnar, he's not going to survive that fight. I'm sorry. That's just the realism. That's the realism of the way fighting has advanced. And that's the realism of size. Size matters when you get into a fight. Wrestling has always been about the spectacle of size and controlling the crowd. It's not about the in-ring. The reason Hulk Hogan could be so good was because he was a showman. The reason Andre the Giant was so popular is because he didn't look like anybody else that you'd ever seen. And so when I make this size argument, it's not to take a shit on people who are unfortunately shorter than other people. It is the reality of life. And a lot of what I do when I speak in reality terms. I don't speak with a lot of feeling because feelings you get over passionate about your feelings and you say things that are incorrect. When I speak about facts, the facts are that you take a guy who is 6'5", 300 pounds in a bar, and you take a guy who is 5'10", almost 99% of the time, the bigger guy is going to win that fight just based on, it doesn't matter, just overwhelmingly being able to pick up that small guy and ram him into a wall. That is the reality. That is unfortunate. When we talk about professional basketball, the guy who's 6'11" is always going to have an advantage over the guy who's 5'10". Now, is that saying that there can never be a 5'10" person in the NBA? No. But you're going to be hard-pressed to find a 5'10" guy who maintains success over a long period of time because it's just not conducive to the sport. When we're talking about professional wrestling, you can find, and this is going to piss people off, but you can find 150 girls walking down the street that are built the same size as Io Sky and Roxanne Perez. Now, they don't have the same athleticism. This is not discounting how hard. I believe that people like Roxanne and Io have to work harder to obtain success. But the reality is I can go pick from the streets, take the same argument on the guy's side. I could find you 5,000 Darby Allins right now. But you can only find 1 to 2 Rhea Ripleys in a country, right? They just don't exist. They're genetic fucking freaks. Bianca Belair, genetic freak. Rhea Ripley, genetic freak. Roman Reigns, genetic freak. Drew McIntyre, genetic freak. That's what makes them special. So they still have to build the skills that it takes to be a great professional wrestler, but they started an advantage, and it's just easier to like. There's nothing I'm sorry. You could put Bryan Danielson and Swerve Strickland in the ring, and they can have a hell of a wrestling match, and it could be technically one of the best things in the world. But you can't tell me that when you put Roman Reigns and Brock Lesnar in a ring together, there's not a different fucking feeling. That when you put Drew McIntyre and Brock Lesnar in the ring, there's not a different, it's just not, it's a car crash. It's a collision. It's why in the UFC, the heavyweights are not the most skilled fighters, but it's the fights we want to see because we expect violence. When I think it's Derek Lewis, when Derek Lewis hits you, you go night-night. You go bye-bye, right? When you get hit by a Brock Lesnar, you get hit by these big heavyweights, you go night-night. Now, that's not saying that little guys can't have great fights. It's just saying that there's something about size and professional wrestling that size wins. Size matters. And so I don't love the argument that Royce Gracie, I should look to Royce Gracie to believe that when Io Sky and Rhea Ripley get in the ring together, there's a possibility. No. What I have to look to is storytelling. Storytelling is the element. Now, I can believe Io Sky can beat Rhea Ripley when you give me the right story elements, right? Maybe Io has to cheat to win. Or if Io's a babyface, maybe somebody helps her. Maybe Rhea Ripley makes a big mistake where she pulls off a turnbuckle and that ends up costing her. When you have disparity in size, like a Rhea Ripley and an Io Sky, you have to insert very surgical storytelling for that to make sense. That's all I'm saying. That's the size argument I make. I will continue to make it. I've said it. You're not going to sell me. The reason that so many IWC like AEW is because they look in the mirror and they see themselves in Darby Allin. And they see themselves in Jungle Boy Jack Perry or whatever his name is. And they see themselves in Adam Cole. And it gives them this belief because we're past the days of like, most people now, most of these younger wrestling fans, they all want to be wrestlers. That's the fucking problem. I was a basketball player who enjoyed wrestling from the outside. I've never once in my life believed I wanted to be a professional wrestler, so I'm able to watch it with an objective set of eyes. But if you've ever wanted to be a pro wrestler, you're probably a fan of AEW because you look in the mirror and you go, hey, I'm about Darby Allin's size. He gives me hope. As somebody who was a high-level basketball player, I look at them and go, they're little, man. I don't believe that. I want to see the 6'4" Scottish fucking warrior. I want to see the beast incarnate Brock Lesnar. I want to see Roman Reigns. That's what I want to see. Now, I like to sprinkle in the Carmelo Hayes and the guys like that. And I think like Braun Breakers, guys who are a little bit undersized, can make themselves feel larger than life. But you're never going to sell me on this idea that size doesn't matter in wrestling. In any sport, though. In any sport, right? You're not going to ever sell me on this idea that, like, the offensive line, there's a avatar for what they should look like. The defensive line, there's an avatar. This is how fast a cornerback should run. This is the height of a receiver. Doesn't mean guys aren't going to break that standard, but the reality is we see continued success from people who fit a certain build. And in professional wrestling, Rhea Ripley is the alpha female. These other women are chasing Rhea Ripley, and they will continue. And I don't care about oversaturation. I don't care about people being tired of her going after the title. This is human nature. This is what casual fans want. If you get tired of seeing people be successful, I tend to believe you are a more hardcore fan because you kind of you're looking at more nuanced things than just the idea that Rhea Ripley is the female Andre the Giant, and people paid to see Andre the Giant. They paid to see Hulk Hogan. There's a reason Hulk Hogan was successful. There's a reason Andre the Giant, Macho Man Randy Savage, all these guys, they were just larger than life. They were big characters. So that's my argument on the size thing. It's not that I don't believe other people can be successful. It's just it's weird to me when we start speaking from like a one-off, giving one-off examples where it worked one time. I got a comment on YouTube from Super Jose Link. He says, so this is how I want Dominic's story to go. He's going to do his whole dirty, dumb thing for maybe another year, maybe 2 years, and something's going to happen. He's going to snap out of it a bit. He's going to be like, you know what? These comments are hard to read. You know what? Like this is getting too much. Like something either going to happen to his dad, I know the wrestler is going to like disrespect him absolutely so much that he snaps out of it. And he's going to go like, dude, that's my dad. What the hell are you doing? And you know he's going to get in there with that person. And he's going to basically protect his dad's honor. Basically what this is saying is that Dominic Mysterio is going to take over the mantle and become the next generation of Rey Mysterio. Nothing against this take here, Super Jose. I would have agreed with you about 2 years ago on this. I said Dominic Mysterio desperately needed to take on the mantle of the Rey Mysterio name. Unfortunately, Jose, I think that Dominic Mysterio graduated out of this storyline. I think Dominic Mysterio is more Eddie Guerrero than he is Rey Mysterio. I think Dominic Mysterio has formed his own character and he's graduated away from needing to be his dad's keeper. I don't have any problem. I do think we will get the feel make good story at some point where Dom snaps out of it and he does protect his dad and he goes on one last run with his dad. I believe that's highly possible. I just don't think he needs the mask. I don't think he needs the name Rey Mysterio. I think having the Mysterio name is enough, and I think he has forged a path. I think the situation with Rhea Ripley did him so much good. It was amazing, the run he had with Rhea, and then he did a good job of catapulting that and using that with Liv and continuing the momentum to where now he's one of the biggest baby faces in the company. That's wild for me to say because I'm telling you, Jose, 3 years ago I had written Dominic Mysterio off as a sideshow joke. I still say it's a long path for Dom to get to a world heavyweight championship, but I'm going to say this now. I'm not going to fucking speak definitively on Dominic Mysterio because he seems like the kind of guy who's going to prove me wrong. He seems like the kind of guy who's going to figure it out, who's going to keep taking the next step. I just don't think he needs the mask or the moniker of Rey Mysterio in order to do that. This last question was brought to us by Wavy D in the Discord. He says, if WWE brought more romance storylines into Monday Night Raw and Friday Night SmackDown, which characters would I want to see in those stories? I like romantic storylines in wrestling. I think they're fun. I think they add. Give me one at a time. I don't need the stories or the scene littered with these stories, but every so often a good Rhea Dom is fun to watch. I used to enjoy. I thought AJ Lee was extremely good at the kind of crazy girl romance. I actually took my 10-year-old daughter and sat her down and showed her all the AJ Lee stuff. I was like, this is why I think AJ Lee was so good, was because of her character work. And my daughter was like, man, she was fantastic. So the first thing that jumps out to my mind, and this is a shitty example because this is my brain doing the stupid thing of like, I liked that, give me more of that. The first person who jumped in my mind was Roxanne Perez because I think she can do what AJ Lee does, if not better. So that was kind of the cheap answer that jumped into my head. If I'm being realistic, I think I'd like to see them lay into the real life love interests that they have available to them right now. Like, why don't we see Montez Ford and the Street Profits aligning with Bianca Belair in some form of faction? I'm not sure why we hold them apart. And I understand that maybe some of it has to do with spouses not wanting to work together, but there is an element of like, there are certain people, Lauren is one of those people who gravitate to the natural realness of situations like that. So I think like a Montez Ford and Bianca Belair would be fun to see on-screen chemistry between them. I know Becky and Seth have mentioned they don't like to work together, but it feels like right now that we're sort of in this prime opportunity where their stories and the stars have aligned, that why don't they just join up and cut a couple promos together or stand, what would it hurt to have Becky Lynch with Paul Heyman by her side? It just feels like the credibility would be astronomical. So I think I'd like to see them start playing into that. And then like Jimmy Uso and Naomi, I think is one that could absolutely work as an on-screen pairing. Jimmy doesn't have a lot going on right now. So to kind of build and buy into what Naomi's doing would absolutely work on screen as a pairing. So I like the idea of maybe laying into some of these real life story couples. Because one thing I don't like is I'm still not sure, are we supposed to acknowledge that these relationships exist? Because every so often we get the tease that these things exist, right? That Naomi and Jimmy are together, but then their values kind of never align at the same time when they're on, SmackDown together. And so I think it would just be interesting to see those values line up, even if they weren't directly factions. If it was just little tidbits of like conversation in the back where they're talking to each other, I think that could be interesting to see Bianca and Montez talk before a match and kind of hype each other up. If we're going to lay into some of the realism, I think we should lay into more of it. Or even like, if Montez Ford turns heel, to see Bianca show a displeasure to that situation, I think would be an interesting and fun dynamic. But it's just weird. I never know if we're supposed to, do we know, like as a wrestling watcher, are we supposed to know that Montez and Bianca are together? Or are we supposed to separate out of that wrestling mindset and watch the Hulu show and go, okay, behind the curtains together, on the show not together? It's weird. That's a weird dynamic for me that I think I have trouble navigating that sometimes. But that's it for today, guys. Yeet on over and like this video. Leave a comment. It really helps us out. Even if you just want to say, what's up, Nerdy D or Dirty D or whatever the fuck I'm calling myself today. I'll be back tomorrow with more, what's Wednesday? Women Crush Wednesday. We're going to do some new stuff for Women's Crush Wednesday tomorrow. I'm the Notorious Dirty D, and we can ring the final bell.
Notorious. Big it